This is episode 333 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, I was in Florida last week for the annual State Policy Network meeting. All the think tanks came together. It was great to be in a freer state than New Mexico here. A lot of great people together, over 1,000, I would say, pretty close to the norm in terms of the amount of attendees at a State Policy Network convention. We did not have this conference last year. I'm not sure if they would have been able to, but they had scheduled it for Chicago, which not a good place to try to be free in a pandemic. The planners do the best they can. There's limited numbers of places with the kind of hotel space that we want for the conference, and they have some kind of prohibition, which I think is a good one, on publicly financed convention centers and the like. Obviously, as a group of libertarian, small government conservative folks, meeting at a taxpayer finance facility is not something that they are too keen about. Of course,
Well, and Paul, if you've ever been to a big convention in Chicago, they had a fire there many years ago, and they've used that now as an excuse to basically extract money from anyone who participates at their facility there in Chicago. It's corruption at a third world level. It's crazy. So.
Oh, you mean the famous Chicago fire in like the 1800s?
No, there was a fire at the convention. No, not the fire, not Mrs. O'Leary's cow, a different one.
Ooh, I was like, wow, that is a scam if you're really collecting money from people for that kind of thing.
No, and so they'll make you, it's one of those union work rule things where it's like above and beyond. To plug in a plug into an outlet requires a licensed electrician. Of course it does. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was a little surprised even when they scheduled Chicago. I mean, to me, Chicago's not a bad place to go because it's close to my old stomping grounds in the Midwest, and it's a direct flight from Albuquerque, which are few and far between.
Exactly.
But Orlando isn't a direct flight, but it's not too bad. Once you get through Houston, going through Houston on Southwest, it works fine. But it was nice to be back together with so many great liberty-minded people. And of course, being in Florida, you had relatively limited COVID craziness. Of course, in a big hotel environment with a big crowd, I'm vaccinated, so I figure at the worst case, I will probably get some kind of minor sniffles or some kind of issue like that. We're here 5 or so days since I returned, feeling A-okay. Wore a mask on the plane, of course, which is one of the sillier rules that we've had in place since COVID, but overall, a great trip. And while I was gone, there was discussion, not an announcement yet, but the rumors are swirling over Mark Ronchetti, and I think it was a certain prominent Albuquerque-based blogger who decided that he had heard...
The Rona Barrett of politics?
Yeah, so we've discussed a little bit about Mark Ronchetti between the two of us. He, of course, put up a very good fight against Ben Ray Lujan for the Senate seat in 2020. If he jumped into the race, he would be a very formidable candidate. But, of course, there's limited weatherman jobs in New Mexico, and I think it's safe to say that he already had a little bit of a time getting back to his old position with KRQE. Not sure if he feels he could leave that job and come back should he lose and have a job still, and whether he feels comfortable potentially having to leave New Mexico or look for alternative employment in some other state. It's hard to say, but certainly Ronchetti would be a top-line Republican candidate in a party with relatively few of them.
Yes, and I agree. I think he would be a good candidate. I'm very pleased with the other candidates in the race compared to a typical year running against an incumbent governor. What we've had, historically, Paul, since the New Mexico Constitution was amended to allow governors to succeed themselves, so basically serve 2 terms. No governor has been defeated during that after that first term, so it's a little bit daunting. And back to the things when you look at registration of Republicans relative to Democrats, and they're increasingly independents in New Mexico. It's called decline to state. That's your only choice with regard to that. I think it would still be an uphill battle, but there is a long time between now and that election, and there's certainly President Biden's approval ratings have gone down. The governor's approval ratings have gone down there. And, who knows what things would happen. It's certainly not an impossibility that if Mr. Ronchetti were to get in the race, that he could win the nomination. But I do want to say I don't think that's a foregone conclusion either. He has some formidable opponents in there, a couple of whom come to mind for me having a very good chance of winning that nomination also. But yeah, this will be interesting, and it is going to be interesting whether that rumor, that blogger rumor, is true, and in fact, if he announces in the next, I don't know, several days, weeks, or months.
Yeah, and just to be totally clear, I think that you have a lot of Republican candidates who feel like Lujan Grisham is vulnerable, and Ronchetti's probably doing the polling on that as we speak, trying to figure out what his chances might be. But certainly there's a lot of frustration, and I think it transcends party affiliation. Definitely Democrat business owners suffer the same as Republican business owners. Question is, how many of them are there, and are there enough to sway the election? So it's a very interesting time, and I think probably we'll know more about the full scope of the field by a year out. So coming a couple months from now, essentially. And it's fascinating time. This is the time of great optimism and kind of hope for candidates, because things are just starting out. They're meeting with people. They're traveling around the state and getting to know them. And and likewise, it'll be a long and bruising process after that for the next year until Election Day. And definitely, I'm of the opinion that we could use significant change in New Mexico and change the way this state is led. But time will tell. It's always tough when you're a Republican to win those statewide offices, as we've seen over the years. While we believe, and I think the data show that the economy in general has been poorly managed by our current administration, the money is just rolling in, Wally. It's
from the favorite industry of New Mexico.
Yeah, the industry they all love to hate.
But they cash the checks.
They do cash those checks, yes. And that in this iteration involves the Early Childhood Trust Fund, which was only set up in 2020. And I mean, boy, it just shows you how potent that oil and gas industry. This is an article from New Mexico In Depth, Trip Jennings, August 30th. The semi-permanent fund, I guess. It's a new trust fund. New as in it was set up during the 2020 legislative session, so not 2021, a year before that, but very recent. And that trust fund has already doubled its money from $300 million to nearly $650 million, thanks to booming tax collections and a strong recovery in the oil and gas markets. So as we've talked about, the budget situation writ large in New Mexico, $8.4 billion or $8.8 billion, with $7.4 being the previous budget. This early childhood fund has grown even more, and now we're talking, when will it get to $1 billion? So it's It's another way that the state, unfortunately for us, is just going to have more money to spend. This early childhood stuff we've talked about, we've had experts on. It's very questionable what positive impacts will happen. We have proposals for early childhood funding and new programs coming from the Biden administration. We have a ballot measure to change the Constitution of New Mexico in November of 2022. Question is, what money will pass? How will the money be used? And of course, will we actually move the needle on improving outcomes for our children? And that's the one that we all should care about. That's the one I'm most skeptical about. And especially with the current COVID and current and past COVID policies that have really impacted our children most direly, I don't expect that any amount of money is going to really do what needs to be done to improve our children's lives in New Mexico. But we're going to spend lots of money and find out.
Yes, and we are going to spend lots of money because we have lots of money to spend. Paul, I was thinking about the latest revenue estimate with the additional oil and gas money, and now New Mexico almost has enough money to do almost anything that they would like to do. They have enough money to reform gross receipts tax. They have enough money to build out a massive broadband incentives to every far-flung corner of our state. They have money to basically make our teachers the highest paid in the land. But the key is which of those will they select? And there's a two-part process here. You spend the money, but then you see, do you get a positive impact from that money? And it really depends on what the process is. Other than you and me, and I'm sure there's a few other people that are talking about it. It doesn't seem like that gross receipts tax or tax reform is anywhere too high. It seems like they're more likely to want to add taxes for some reason, I guess because they can. But yes, there is money aplenty. And, we've talked before on the podcast is that it is an interesting situation when the coffers of the state government are full, when the education attainment, the businesses across the state other than oil and gas tend to be struggling. And so there's this giant disconnect, all on the fulcrum of we're getting close to a $10 billion budget in a little old state like New Mexico with around 2 million people.
Yeah, it is going to be very interesting. This is the issue to watch, not just for this legislative session, but for the next couple, is whoever's in power, what will they do and not do in terms of spending this money for the future of New Mexico. I'm not a believer that oil and gas is going anywhere in terms of going away, that we're going to magically come up with some alternative in the very near future. But you only get so many bites at the apple in terms of a boom of likes that we've seen. And this is, again, a production-driven boom, first and foremost. We've discovered, or the oil and gas industry has discovered, new formations, predominantly in the Permian Basin, that are driving this. Of course, prices being relatively elevated helps generate more revenue. But we have so many opportunities to use this money and use it to better our state. The Albuquerque Journal, their editorial board tends to be at least on the sane side of things, and they're talking about infrastructure. They've talked about the gross receipts tax, so I'll give them that. But it'll be a cafeteria there, a buffet, a pre-COVID buffet of options,
a veritable smorgasbord of tax policy.
What the legislature wants to do, and I'll be honest, while I'm not opposed to the general concept of ramping up rainy day funds, all of these permanent funds, all of these special trust funds, and other uses of the money are just deferred spending. Yes, we know oil and gas is volatile, but that's why you diversify your economy. You diversify your economy because we're still 48th, 49th, and 50th across the board in so many areas, even while we've benefited from all of these oil and gas dollars. What we need to do is diversify our economy with this oil and gas money as a tool. And by diversify, I mean bring in different private sector business options by making New Mexico not just competitive with our neighboring states, but a competitor nationwide and ultimately globally for jobs and economic development. And we've never made a concerted effort to really make New Mexico that kind of competitive state. But with these kinds of dollars flowing in, we could make a serious dent in that situation and at least get off of the bottom in a lot of these respects. But again, time will tell, and the early returns do not bode well, as we see there is a proposal for a tax increase that is being formulated out there. Yes, you heard that right, a tax increase. Now, the folks pushing this tax increase are supposedly doing so, of course, for your own good, right? It's not about whether you'll want more money. We know that that's not where government is supposed to be right now. This is a proposal over tobacco taxes, and we know tobacco is not particularly good for you. We know smoking, especially, is not great for you. But the idea, and this was from the Santa Fe New Mexican last week, that you should be out pushing for a tax increase, even one that's supposedly for your better health and best interest long term. That doesn't mean that vaping is not an option. Vaping should be an option. It's a much healthier option, quite frankly, than the smoking of the cigarettes. But this is a proposal that apparently, according to the Santa Fe New Mexican and several legislators quoted in the piece, is going to be brought up for consideration in the 2022 legislative session. So if there was a push to shift towards vaping, get people doing that, which is much safer, I would at least find their health concerns more credible. But that's not where this is going. This is another tax.
Tax them while you can. And, that brings up just a final point I'd like to make is that, by historical standards, oil and gas is booming in New Mexico again. Lots of drilling rigs operating, lots of production, lots of money coming in. But as we've seen just in the last couple of years, and obviously the COVID kind of futures price going negative was a very special thing. But even throwing that away, that we've seen, lots of volatility in the price. And there's an old saying that that I've heard from the veterans of the oil and gas industry. It's called the oil and gas men's prayers. Lord, grant me another boom. I promise not to, and I'll translate loosely, mess this one up. But you can't count on oil and gas being there forever. Things could change dramatically. Our friends at OPEC could decide to do things. There could be lots of other things that happen. The price could go way up. The price could go way down. And we've seen both of those in the last decade. So, get while the getting's good as opposed to just spending it on something when we look back here at, 3, 4, 5 years in the future and say, well, that we didn't take very good advantage of that. Basically what's amounting to a windfall effect here at state government.
Yeah, and the article on tobacco taxes is from the Santa Fe New Mexican, Daniel Chacon, September the 2nd, 2021. Some of the folks talking about raising the tobacco tax are Senator Martin Hickey, a Democrat from Albuquerque, of course, and Roger Montoya, another Democrat from Espanola. So it actually seems to me from reading the article that they are using vaping as the justification for the tax, which makes no sense. Again, this is not to get too far into it, but we're going to hit coronavirus in a second, Wally, so we might as well. There are people who believe that tobacco's bad, so people should never smoke tobacco, and that government policy should be geared towards the complete eradication and elimination of tobacco use. Then there are people who focus on harm reduction. Harm reduction means that you have a substance that is both addictive and pleasurable that people have been using, I don't know, for most, if not all of human history, and that you would be better off funneling or channeling that usage into less harmful usage of the product, i.e. vaping as opposed to traditional cigarettes. And you can guess which way these two representatives are going. They are seemingly in the zero usage side of things. I think that's an unreasonable proposition, but
and Paul, just to put a little context in this, we've just legalized marijuana as well.
Exactly.
So we're promoting marijuana. And I read an article this morning, and it did not. This is not the be all and end all, but it talked about people, relatively young people. They don't have real high rates of heart attack, but of those that use marijuana, their rate was quite a bit higher. Up into the single percentage points as opposed to well below. And so, yeah, there's issues with lots of things. We tried prohibition with alcohol. That seemingly wasn't a good idea. Now we're in the business, government-wise, of supporting marijuana while we're trying to kill off cigarettes. And it just all makes for some very interesting... everything's in a silo. It's like, let's not take a look at the big picture. New Mexico has relatively high cigarette prices, not as high as some places, but I look around and I see it's like, I've never been a cigarette smoker in my life. I've enjoyed a cigar too, and enjoy is in air quotes here. It's a mixed bag for me in my youth. But man, it's expensive to smoke cigarettes now. There's no doubt about that. And so if cigarettes are outlawed, well, only outlaws smoke cigarettes. And you've seen in places that raise the taxes too high, they just import them from other states and other countries. So
yeah, or actually in New Mexico, tribal lands.
You don't even have to go that far. That's right.
You definitely don't have to go very far. And speaking of events on tribal lands and COVID, Deb Haaland, former congresswoman from the Albuquerque area and current Secretary of the Interior, had a wedding where lots and lots of very important people, very sophisticated people, were maskless. And I'm talking about folks like Senator Elizabeth Warren and a handful of other state representatives from Congress. Deb Haaland, of course, not wearing a mask for a significant part of events that were taking place indoors, reception, presumably. We were seeing pictures of this from mostly John Block in the Opinion Post, who did a great job of getting this information and sharing it. It became a national story for a few days. Of course, again, if President Trump, for example, had been at a wedding and he was touting masks and really pushing everybody on masks, this would be not a day-to-day story. This would be a weekly or monthly outrage that the media would never let go. But when Obama or Deb Haaland get together to party with their friends, vaccine or not, they're supposed to wear a mask according to state of New Mexico policy. It's not a big deal, and it's kind of down the memory hole after a few days. But I wanted to make sure folks were reminded of that because after the long holiday weekend, it's already moved well beyond the news cycle in terms of this particular issue. But it as a parent with children who are wearing masks every day, who whine about wearing masks to school every day, it really is an issue that bothers me, and I'm not going to give it up until my kids are mask-free at school.
Without having to go to a wedding of a high-profile person.
Yes, please let's not have to sit through Deb Haaland's wedding. speaking of kids in the schools, David Scrase, the guru of the Lujan Grisham administration's health policy, he wants more testing. And I'm not saying that he's wrong. I am not a health expert, but I can say that it seems that testing, and what I've read about the testing, is it's very sensitive. Often people do not have symptoms. And I just, testing in schools, he's talking about we need more testing for COVID in schools. I don't see it. As a parent of some kids who you see kids in school who are not displaying any symptoms, and then they're tested with no reason to be tested, and then you have people quarantined, school shut down. It just strikes me as a very questionable policy. When else in human history have we not had people sick or displaying any signs of being sick, and then tested them and said, "Oh, you have to go stay by yourself for 2 weeks because you came out positive on some test or another." Now, it's one thing to have symptoms and be tested and then address that issue, but to just randomly testify 25% of the kids in a school each week, it's just, it makes no sense. That's already what they're trying to do. I'm suspicious and questioning whether Scrase is going to try to make these tests mandatory for all schools. And that's where we're going to have a real conversation around the Guessing household about moving back to the homeschool model. But it just seems like the more they push these policies, the more unlikely it is we're ever going to get back to something resembling normal.
Yeah, and then Paul, as I look at where we are in the COVID-19, and the answer is I don't know, and I'm sure no one does, because there's lots of opinions out there. But the virus seems to react how it does. Is that there are signs that we're going from epidemic to endemic. Something like the flu, where yes, it's always there, but it'll be manageable. There may be pockets of it coming up. It's interesting. At some level, there's huge swaths of the population that just are kind of ignoring the COVID at this point. They're going about their business, not saying that some of them can't catch the virus and become very, very ill. And then in those cases, it's certainly become a way different thing. But, in place after place, I was reading an article about Hawaii, which, man, they have been shut down like crazy, and they're having a big flare up. Places like Israel that are now into their third and going for a fourth vaccination, and they still have lots of cases. It's one of those things. It's like controlling and managing as opposed to eradicating. There's only a couple places that seem like they have that eradication goal, like New Zealand and Australia, and just speculating, thinking out loud here, is like they may rue the day, because if depending on how these things go, you may keep the virus at bay for weeks, months, and maybe even years. And then once you have any interaction with the outside world, there you go. It's going to be in your population that may not have much immunity. So it's very interesting, and it comes down to there's politically very much two ways of close down at the first sight of trouble and keep open at the first sight of trouble and see what's going on. And while neither one in their purest form has proven to be a perfect, it seems like the places that are really shut down oriented have really not fared that well in the long term. And so we'll have to see where we come out in New Mexico. And just thinking back to the big discussion where we are in educational attainment in our state, and putting our kids back predominantly in online learning for another year or 2, 3, what that would do to them. It's a pretty frightening prospect.
Yeah, it is. And, I think that Lujan Grisham should be applauded. While the vaccines haven't been maybe as effective as we would all like them to be, they're still the best tool we have in addressing COVID-19. But that doesn't mean that the masking policies in our schools, masking indoors for adults, regardless of vaccination status, all these other policies, and the testing that is going on, and it seems like Scrase wants to do, that is going to have much of an impact. And like I said about the tobacco issue, you've got to get away from this idea that you're going to eradicate something and focus more on how you live with something. And by live, I mean do the very best you can to live your day-to-day life. There are, always going to be obstacles, but there are always going to be new events and new things that you want to do that you make a decision weighing those consequences, whether you go forward or not. And speaking of an event that is weighing the consequences and trying to thread a middle ground, the International Balloon Fiesta is going to require masks, at least as they say it, indoors for any Balloon Fiesta oriented events, which for most people, that is a trivial aspect of the Balloon Fiesta. I mean, there's receptions and there's other functions that you have indoors at the Balloon Fiesta.
But even a lot of those functions are in those kind of corporate tents over on the side, and they're out predominantly outside.
Right. Yeah. The indoors versus outdoors nature of those is very much in question. But they are going to require masks in some of the crowded areas, at least as I understand it. Now, what that actually means in practice, I think, is really about enforcement. There will be no vaccination mandate, which is different. It's a deviation from what the state fair is doing, and I think that is a big issue. It's ironic, of course, because yes, my children, a lot of children love the Balloon Fiesta and seeing the balloons. Vaccines are not really a concern for the younger children. They can't be vaccinated. The fair is where you have a lot more children directly involved in the entire process. And I'd say that the fair is an even more child-driven event. And of course, they're requiring the vaccine. And it's become a very big deal, especially for the livestock displays. And I believe I just saw today that the livestock portion of the fair is canceled entirely. I don't know exactly what that all means, but that's certainly a big part of why you have a fair in the first place. So they're doing a lot of that in Roswell, and some people presumably are going over to Oklahoma City to participate in various events, I guess, at their state fair. But I think with the governor pushing very hard and saying she's leaning hard on these types of events, I think the Balloon Fiesta and whatever its actual policy on masks will wind up really being has probably done the best job of threading that needle. And I'll just add that having been to numerous early morning launches at the Balloon Fiesta, most of those early launches are in the dark. So there's not a lot of opportunity for widespread enforcement of a mask mandate. Yes, it does eventually get light, but what is going to be deemed as a crowd? I mean, I think it's just going to wind up being a lot of people will wear a mask a lot of the time, and if you're in a crowd, you may be told to put a mask on, but that's going to be the end of it. But we'll see, and we're still, the jury is still out in the guessing game as to whether we actually attend the Balloon Fiesta or not this year.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of interesting things, and then my favorite is the what I call the half mask, where somebody has it and their nose and mouth are sticking out, so they have a mask on. But seeing a lot of that in grocery stores and in other places of business, both among the patrons as well as the folks operating. So yeah, we will see how all of that goes.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues that probably they were concerned about is that because this is such a big international issue of international event of importance, that you're not going to have a lot of people. The last thing you want is to have hundreds of people from foreign countries or out of state show up and be suddenly told, oh, you have to be vaccinated, and for that to not be really an option for them. The mask, while more a totem than anything else, is something that can easily be, handed to somebody at the gate and say, here, take this, put this on. So I think it's more of a logistical expedient than anything else. But we shall see. It'll be intriguing to watch to see if the governor tries to, institute some kind of crackdown. She could always try to be more aggressive with enforcement. But enforcement is always the issue with these kinds of things. All right. We're moving on beyond much of COVID. So we're actually returning to a favorite topic, Virgin Galactic. Now, we knew that there was going to be some delays with Virgin Galactic in terms of retrofitting their spacecraft in order to make them fully ready to launch on a very regular basis. But kind of out of nowhere, the FAA tells us that the ship went off course significantly to the point where it was outside of the airspace it was supposed to be in. This is during the July 11th launch with Richard Branson on board. And I've got to say, I'm going to put this up at Airs of Enchantment. I'm going to distribute this widely on social media. The New Yorker has an excellent article, The Red Warning Light on Richard Branson's Spaceflight. And it talks about a lot of different issues, not just with that flight, but with the safety record at Virgin Galactic in general. And it's a really well done article taking a look at kind of where things are, but it really sheds a lot of attention, a lot of detail on what actually happened. And to say that that was the quintessential, flight that went off without a hitch and all these good things about it, definitely not when you consider the way things actually apparently went after, we're 2 months out from this, and a lot of the details have come out. Definitely not as clean of a flight as they would like to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I read that. It's one of those, they were out of bounds, Paul, and in two of the sports that I'm aware of that has out of bounds, golf and in skiing, those are both bad things. And it did not sound like the FAA was pleased or that it would be necessarily an easy fix for them to get back in their good graces to keep going forward.
Yeah. I think the critical thing here is that if you go out of your approved airspace, that can wind up leading to conflicts with other forms of aviation. Not sure what exactly would be in that area. I think you're up a little too high for a traditional jumbo jet or 747, whatever it might be.
But you also have to come down, and it speaks to the precision of where this technology is right now, which is maybe not as good as certainly the Virgin Galactic people had hoped, and most of New Mexico for that matter.
Yeah. So I think the big thing, the takeaway is, when I first heard this, I thought FAA puts a hold on future flights from Virgin Galactic. I thought, that could be pro forma, no big deal. But reading the New Yorker piece that goes into detail, it is this is something that's going to be a huge challenge for them to get past. So they were talking about a year from now, essentially, end of summer 2022. I would say that we could be looking at end of summer 2023 or beyond in terms of the manned tourism flights, because you still had the Italian mission that was supposed to go off shortly, and then they were going to be retrofitting. You got this, I think, is going to be a serious challenge. You don't want to mess with the FAA. You don't want to get outside of their good graces. All right, now moving into local city issues. This is a real debacle unfolding in the city of Albuquerque with regard to public financing. We've never been a fan of public financing. We've spoken out against it, but mostly against democracy dollars, which was a kind of a new addition to public financing. But Manny Gonzalez trying to get public financing to the tune of $600 $100,000 for his campaign, obviously having a few cases of fraud or not legitimate signatures and $5 approaches, but those are common in all these campaigns. You always have some level of people not being completely honest, and the idea is whether you throw those out, and if they still make it, well, then you're okay. But the city clerk, Ethan Watson, who we've tangled with and have a settlement to prove our tangling with Ethan Watson.
You got more than a T-shirt, Paul. You got a check.
We got a nice check, yes. And it just strikes me as this public financing system could or should be on its last legs. It's truly a debacle. And if Manny Gonzalez were to win, or Eddie Aragon, or one of the non-Tim Keller candidates, let's put it that way, we could see some pretty significant changes. The Journal, Albuquerque Journal, says some kind of third-party referee. I don't know how you get an honest third-party referee in these kinds of political races, but what's your take on this issue, Wally?
Well, it just seems to me the way it's set up, with proper abuse, this could turn into a Chicago machine style of politics where no opponent of a sitting mayor could ever qualify. Somebody makes the accusation, it goes through the administration that is currently sitting, and the state Supreme Court is, if I read it correctly, said that there were some due process things that they say, okay, do these due process things. So if you're going to take their money away, you at least have to show this. They showed that, but yes, would an independent third party make things better? I don't think it would necessarily make it worse. But as you say, this it's just fraught with problems. And not to name names for candidates in the past, but there's been rumors every time this has been in play for the period that it has, that people are like, "Oh, you sign it, and I'll put the $5 in." That's not like an unheard of thing to happen, and I will just say that I've seen that personally. Back in the day, not with anything to do with the sitting mayor or any of the candidates, but there was a time where I was approached as like, "Oh, just sign this. You need $5, but I got you covered, man." And so, I think, is there the potential for fraud? There is, from my perspective. I have seen it, but then there's this whole other layer of who's refereeing and who's saying whether this is systemic or whether it's just one bad signature going forward, because there's no way that either candidate could get that number and have every one of them be valid above board and pass all the rules. And then it's a question of who decides whether it was done properly or not.
Yeah. We'd be all ears to hear of a third party, but in this state with high levels of politicization, I just suspect that finding an honest to goodness third party arbiter is not likely. And the idea
King David is not available.
Yeah, that the city clerk put up into that position by the sitting mayor, who's then looking at whether the opponent is deserving of that kind of financial support in their run for election. It strikes me as that was never a system that was sustainable or going to work out in a fair manner. Again, getting to local issues, Albuquerque Public School Board postponed a proposed new charter school moratorium. Now, this gets into a little bit of wonkiness, but you have two entities in New Mexico that can approve a charter school. And of course, charter schools are the main schools of choice that we have here in New Mexico, at least unless you have the money to send your kid to the academy or some other private school. They are the schools of choice. There's a lot of great charter schools in the area. My daughter goes to one of them. But Albuquerque Public Schools and school districts are one entity that can approve charter schools. The other is the Public Education Commission, which is formerly the way that education policy was made in our state. Bill Richardson, rightly, I believe, got an education secretary to fulfill many of those duties. The Education Commission now primarily serves as an authorizer across the state. But Albuquerque Public Schools' current school board, not a group that we're super in line with, except for Peggy Muller-Aragon, which I'm sure she opposed the moratorium, although I don't see a vote number on here in terms of the way there was, I guess they just postponed it entirely. There wasn't an actual vote, but there was a lot of pushback against this particular proposal. And the good news is, charter schools have been around for a long time. People know them, people trust them, people have their kids in them. And when they are threatened, they are going to stand up and defend them. So hopefully this is just a concept that has reared its ugly head and will go away. There was a similar proposal at the state level back in 2019, and the same thing happened. You had pushback from a bipartisan basis. So we will be on top of this situation if it comes back. It was something that kind of jumped out of nowhere on us, and we'll make sure to alert folks if there's a renewed push for a moratorium. But I've got to think with this election coming up and the school board up for election, that there's not going to be the appetite to go and push a charter school moratorium, but we shall see.
Yeah, absolutely. It is going to be very interesting. And as you say, that's the only way to make it happen in New Mexico.
Yeah. And finally, I want to add one topic to the last minutes of the show. The wife of one of the APD officers who was injured in the recent shootout in Northeast Heights, one of those 4 officers, the wife, with all of the other policemen, there was one that just got out of the hospital. This woman, her name is, she's the wife of Mario Verbeck. Her name's Trina Verbeck, and she really called out APD Chief Harold Medina and Mayor Keller, calling him, saying, "I'm now your worst nightmare." So I think the anger of a policeman's wife when he has been injured and darn near killed, I think that is the kind of person that can be a real thorn in the side of political figures like Mayor Keller. And we'll see. This is an election year, and she is fired up. So this is going to be another interesting wrinkle to this fall's election for mayor of Albuquerque, not to mention city council. So more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Crime is important, and it is an issue in Albuquerque, and this is unfortunately one of the most disappointing, stark examples, or tragic, I guess, is the word to put on it. But yeah, there's a lot of crime issues here in Albuquerque.
Yeah, and hopefully her husband and all the officers experience full recoveries. But boy, it is it's just a very difficult situation and a difficult problem that all of us want to see resolved. If you're in Albuquerque, if you've been living in Albuquerque and you haven't been impacted by crime, the question is, are you really an Albuquerquean? Or are you really a Burqueño, as the mayor wants to say?
Are you just not very fortunate and or very diligent, and probably a lot of both? So
yeah. All right. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointim.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.